Before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to let everyone know that we had some technical difficulties during the recording of this episode. So you may find that there are some places in there where it sounds like Donna has cut out some. So I just want you to bear with that as you listen to it. And we just want to let you know that up front that there may be some things, some glitchy things going on. And we're aware of that. But the content was so good that we really didn't want to re-record it and take a chance on losing the content as it came out during the initial recording. So without further ado, here it is. You're a guest in my head today.
I don't like being in there. It's scary.
It's very dark. Clean up while you're in there as well.
That'll take a while. It's dirty, dirty boy.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax. HIPAA help is on the way.
Welcome to episode 15 of Help Me with HIPAA, and today we are going to discuss some things about HIPAA that aren't about HIPAA. But first, I know it'll all make sense in sometime before the end. So before we get started, I want to say hello to Donna, my lovely guest host.
Guest host? That means
my lovely co-host.
I don't have to be here next week.
No, you do need to be here. You're a guest in my ear. So I have my earbuds in. You're a guest in my head today.
I don't like being in there. It's scary.
It's very dark. Clean up while you're in there as well.
Yeah. That'll take a while. It's dirty, dirty boy.
Oh, God. So today you want to discuss some things that are around security for any business, really. And I know we talk a lot about HIPAA security and privacy and all that, but it's really not about HIPAA anymore. It really reaches into every layer of business, and there's a framework out there that kind of describes how businesses, both large and small, should be doing certain things to protect their businesses around cybersecurity in particular, because it is a threat to every business, regardless of whether they're in healthcare or not, or whether you're just a small business with a few computers or a large corporation. It's still something that you need to be mindful of, and there are definite things that you can do around security to protect yourself and your clients, your patients, whatever that might be. I mean, I even have a client that's a church, a local church, and they even do some of these things to protect members of their congregation so that the information about their tithing and stuff like that doesn't get out. And it's kind of shocking that they do more around privacy and security than some of my healthcare clients do.
It's shocking and unfortunate. That is, I would agree. Yeah. And yes, it is not just about HIPAA anymore, because I guess even if you're in today's world, you could be in a cave in the middle of nowhere with a camel and be fully interconnected to the internet.
Is my webcam on?
Yes, it is. David lives in a cave. He's a caveman. But the ubiquitous.
Oh, I have to look that word up now.
Yeah,
thanks.
Yeah, the internet is ubiquitous, or the ubiquity of the internet. Yeah, then it is a nature of the beast to understand that when you are connected to the internet, you're connected to the internet. And the internet is the entire world as we know it, not Earth 2.0, Earth 1.0. It can be a wonderful thing to have that connectivity and the sharing of ideas and all of those kind of things. And many people will tell you, those who invented, if you will, the internet, the military came up with this whole idea, and they weren't worried about security. They were creating a way that the U.S. military could store information in one place and all these different places could access the same information. When you're the military, you pretty much assume you're going to secure it. And that was not part of the original design. And now, it's been just, I can recall in the I don't know, maybe the early 90s in my little dial-up modem and running down the hall screaming, "Everybody come look." And it was because they were putting a picture with a news item. You had to wait for a minute, and it would come down one little line at a time, bleep, bleep, bleep. But that was 20 years ago, which in the big scheme of the changes in the human elements, the Industrial Revolution and, all of those things, they didn't happen in 20 years. And we went an amazing leap, and it continues to grow. And a lot of that has to do with the open ability of the internet. However, the internet's open. What that means is if you're not protecting yourself, no one else is.
Right.
Or at least if you're not attempting to lock your door, the police can't help you. So there are a certain number of things that have been released. Both public and private entities are trying to do things to get all business on board. So that's why when we're saying it isn't just HIPAA anymore, it's about all businesses. And unique to medical, there are additional requirements. But when it comes to the security rule, if you go out and last year, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, which is, it's where the nerds gather, but they developed and released a National Cybersecurity Framework. And now the Department of Homeland Security is involved in trying to make this well known as far as they call it their C cubed program, and trying to promote the use of the cybersecurity framework and tools within your business, no matter what it is, to protect the United States. Because if you attack our businesses and break down our economy, well, we all know what happens. And when I try to explain to people who are small businesses, and like you mentioned, even like the church, and many of them don't get it, and they say, I don't have anything anybody wants. Well, that's not true. Because if you're connected to anybody else, you could be connected to someone important. Mm-hmm. And you and I may not be important on the big wheel of spin the wheel and pick somebody to attack, but we have connectivity into a lot of places. And even if we weren't tech people, we would. So, yeah, I mean, you remember how it's apparent that the huge Target breach was launched? You remember where it was launched from?
Yeah, they got in through the heat and air system because it was online.
No, the heating and air vendor uploaded an invoice.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't actually, it was the heating and air vendor had the ability to do their invoices online. And it was the heating and air vendor in that whole Ohio, Pennsylvania, up in that area that covered several states and worked in all the stores. And the computer at the heating and air vendor was attacked with a spear phishing attack. So it was monitoring everywhere they went, and it got them into the Target system. Now, from that point, it's all on the Target people for not having more barriers in between all their different systems. But again, it's the free sharing of information and ideas is what everything is built on, and not thinking about the security pieces. And so that's how they got in, and then they were able to worm their way through the whole network. So, yeah, your one little computer can matter if you can do anything on it besides read your email and play Candy Crush. Mm-hmm. So that's why I wanted to talk about, and let's just be clear, I'm in charge of developing show notes for content. I'm not bullying you every week, but one of the things that we should discuss is, just to give some examples, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce released back in 2009. So we're not talking after all these huge breaches. It's something they knew was coming along. And the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is certainly not someone with a socialist agenda. So it's not like they are trying to make you do things HIPAA, schmippa kind of stuff. But they released a guide on Internet Security Essentials for Business 2.0. And if you read the list of things that they tell you should be doing and you should be worrying about, it's eerily similar to the HIPAA security rule. So it's headings like strong security is smart for business and the nation. common threats to business information, hacking and malware concerns, lost or stolen physical storage, insider threat and human error, accidents and natural disasters. So those are all the things they're telling you the threat environment's there, and that's back in 2009. Then they say you should, to respond to that, you need to set up a secure system, protect your business data, train your workforce, and be prepared to respond when it fails. Well, isn't that essentially what one would call most of the security rule?
Mm-hmm.
You think so?
That goes in line to what we've always said, which is the things in HIPAA are just good common practices in business, period. It's not about healthcare or patient data necessarily. It's just good common practices that should be done in any business. And that's what this points out.
Yeah. And the beauty of it is, because there are so many similarities, you don't have to worry about, well, am I having to do something unreasonable? You're not. The cybersecurity planning, whether it's the cybersecurity framework, it's the recommendations of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, if you look at the Department of Homeland Security and all the things they're concerned about, everything in all of those programs is pointing to the same goal. And HIPAA is just another part of that. And in fact, HIPAA was one of the first ones because it predates a lot of this other stuff. They saw it coming. And believe it or not, the security rule has not really changed since it was released. It went into effect in 2005, and there's not really been any significant changes to it since that time. There's constantly guidance on applying things and new things that come out, but they wrote it in such a way that it allowed you to apply it to what's reasonable and appropriate in your environment. And as things are changing so rapidly, I'm sure that they're going to need to address some additional items that just didn't even exist back when it was written. But overall, everything is the same across the board to a certain point. Is you need to worry about this stuff for your business, and it could affect the entire U.S. economy, or even worse, your computer could become some sort of a bot to affect and attack our own country. So it matters. And part of understanding that is I just went to the Cybersecurity Summit. It was held here in Atlanta a couple of weeks ago. And we were listening to all of these different speakers trying to tell us all of the things they're doing. This was also hosted by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, so it was geared towards businesses. And there were, big businesses there. I mean, like Exxon was there and American Express, and all of the room full of a wide variety of different businesses and different functions within those businesses. And we hear the Secret Service telling us about the cybersecurity team that they have, and a lieutenant colonel from the U.S. Army telling us how the cybersecurity division is being trained and what they're doing to protect us, and how they're focusing all of their different resources to make sure that they have trained individuals to be proactive against these attacks instead of reactive. Because they're coming at the country as a whole, and they're using any little device that they can break into to find a way to use against us, whether it's economically or militarily. So hearing the deputy director of the FBI and the undersecretary for cybersecurity for the Department of Homeland Security, and this Army lieutenant colonel that was very intimidating just by himself, the Secret Service, the FBI field agents, and over and over and over, it drilled into my head more. And we all know my head is hard. Drilling into it is not easy, but it even drilled into it more how we need to not only encourage the people that we've been trying to reach and explain that HIPAA security isn't a game, it isn't something to ignore, it isn't something that's just a nuisance. We need to expand that reach outside into other businesses. And we're actually already doing that to work with other businesses. And they're proactively seeking us to say, I know I need to do these things, and the only standard I know about that does it is HIPAA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of become the gold standard for privacy and security.
And most people that are serious about security will tell you it's not really a gold standard. It doesn't go as far as what many people think it should.
Mm-hmm.
And we're having trouble getting people to get on board and be serious about it. They poke it with a stick, and eventually they'll, get to building something with it. But that poking it with a stick, you can poke it with a stick for a long time before it reacts.
Yeah. And that's how you end up having more government regulation. Not getting on a political kick here, but if we don't take responsibility and protect ourselves and our businesses, which in turn protect others, then, that's kind of what happens is, government step in, they make regulations and laws. And the next thing you know, people want to complain about Big Brother and all these things they have to do, or it becomes illegal, or there's fines, or there's ramifications for not doing it. But that's why, is because you have an opportunity to do that on your own. And because you don't take it seriously, it threatens the national security and all the other things. And I know it sounds like I'm, blowing a big whistle here, but it can be that way. It can be that serious. You never know what kind of a domino effect that you're causing just because you're leaving your own self open.
Oh, yeah. You can't. If we had been having this conversation with a heating and air vendor, can you really expect that, a few years ago, they would have taken us seriously? No.
No.
Not at all.
Probably the day before it happened, they wouldn't have took you seriously. Quite honestly.
Yeah. You're right. It would have been questionable whether they would have then at all. And, the story goes how the FBI busted down their doors, came tearing in there, wanting to seize everything and figure out what was going on. But, and who knows how much of that is true. So don't.
We are not news people.
I know, really. I'm not checking that story, but that was a story. But the whole point of these frameworks is, as someone mentioned to me that were asking me about, how do I build these things for my business? And one of the things they said is, I wouldn't know how to start. I don't want to start from scratch trying to figure this out. How do I know what I'm supposed to do? Somebody needs to tell me what I'm supposed to do. Mm-hmm. So it's the reason that we have stop signs and red lights and yield signs and roundabouts. You've got to control the traffic, and everybody needs to know what they're supposed to do to be safe. So when you're out there driving around on the wild web, not the World Wide Web, it's the Wild Web now. When you're out there driving around, there needs to be a certain amount of controls, and everybody's like, well, why doesn't Google do it, and why doesn't AT&T do it, or Verizon, or David, why aren't you doing it? Because I don't want to have to worry about it. Well, it's the same reason that you don't get to create the traffic rules except on your own driveway. And, if you don't have rules in your own driveway, that's on you. But if that creates an accident out on the street, now we've got a problem. Now it's a public problem. And I come from one of those families where that is actually something you worry about. So the important point of this episode is to understand all of those things. And we're going to have in the show notes, we're going to have links to the cybersecurity framework, which is very technical. And if you're a technical person, it's great reading. We're actively working to create all of our stuff that points to the HIPAA rules, having it also point to those framework rules and kind of integrate it in what we're doing, so that if you are healthcare, we've got those pieces. And if you're not healthcare, we just subset off the pieces that point directly to the framework. But they pretty much cross over and interlock a great deal. The big difference is that HIPAA has to be concerned about much more valuable data. And the data that is PHI is substantially more valuable, believe it or not, than names and addresses and even credit cards, because there's only so much you can do with a credit card. You can sell the credit card number until that card's been shut down, right? You've canceled that card. So they can't make any more money off of it. They have to do it quickly. And as Ray was mentioning, that they test the card, and then once they know they can use it, they quickly hand it off and go buy the gift card, the other things. So they try to do it as fast as possible before you cancel the card. Well, with the medical information, you can't cancel it. Go try to cancel your medical records. You can't. You don't want to, because there's a lot of history in there, and they can sell it forever and make money off of it. And medical identity theft is a rapidly growing problem. And I think we're going to do a whole session just on medical identity theft and why that matters. So yes, we do have stronger requirements under HIPAA that relate to privacy and other concerns, but that is also directly related to how serious the problem is when it comes to the medical information. It's way more serious than the other stuff. But at the same time, here we have the FBI and Homeland Security and the Secret Service and the U.S. military worried about cybersecurity in our private businesses. So clearly, it matters. So there is a great deal of information that we'll give you links to, and there's some other stuff, and that, like the C-Cubed Voluntary program, it has some great tools in it. And one of the things that was in it that I thought was really interesting is a one-page flyer. And if you have trouble getting people to understand the importance of HIPAA in your organization, I recommend you pull this thing, because it's published by the Department of Homeland Security. So it's not directly related to HIPAA in any way. And it talks about understanding the threat environment. Why does the threat environment matter? And it talks about cyber threat and vulnerabilities. And then it gets down to, where do you start if you're actually going to deal with this and you start to understand the threat landscape that your organization is facing? Well, first, understand what's going on out there, all the different vulnerabilities, and asset management. Some form of asset management needs to exist in your company to be able to understand where you may be vulnerable. Then second, determine your cyber events, what you already monitor, the work you're already doing. And I know this sounds oddly like a risk analysis that we just discussed about what you're supposed to do. Understand your threats, understand where your data exists, the assets that you have, understand the threats and how things can be used against them, what kind of incidents and activity reports are you already following and keeping up with, and then figure out how it would impact your business. So you do an assessment. Oh, sounds oddly familiar. And then create or become an active member in an industry or regional information sharing organization. Now, that is a whole new thing that is a big piece of every part of this, that says, let's go beyond the fact that we're going to now have a risk management plan. We're going to do our risk analysis. We're going to have a risk management plan. We're going to have contingency plans and written procedures that we follow so we don't figure it out when it happens. But now we're going to find a way to share information about what we're seeing so that we can determine how serious it is. That is cool.
Yeah. And it's necessary, because the criminals will definitely have their quote unquote networks. So, we should have networks of information as well.
It's a legislative issue as well, because everybody's like, well, I'm not handing that over. And then that goes to the IRS or it goes to the FBI or whatnot, and it becomes common knowledge, and then they use it against me at some other point. So there's a big problem with information sharing and who's going to have access to it, because when you look at these threats, you're talking about vulnerabilities in your own systems. How did they get at me? So there's a great deal of concern about industry secrets and competition and all of those kind of things. So over time, they're going to resolve that. Who knows when? In the meantime, find some place where you can keep up with things. And we struggle to keep up with things. So I know that's not something that you take, off the cuff and say, oh, sure, I'm going to start doing that. Well, there you go. Do you have anything else to add?
No, other than, like I've already mentioned, really, that, every business should take this, very seriously. And my opinion is that, and it's certainly my opinion, my opinion is that your practice, your normal everyday healthcare practice, should be asking some of these questions of their other business associates as well. That should be part of your due diligence, but this is a way for you to ask the right questions and kind of know what you need to be asking and what you need to be looking for. They should be doing these things as well as you are. And even, honestly, even if they're not a quote unquote business associate, it's still not a bad idea to say, look, are you doing any type of assessments? Are you doing anything? What are you doing around security? Do you do any kind of assessments on that? Or do you have antivirus? Do you have firewalls in place? I mean, it's good information to know. And, you brought up the breach about Target and all that. And, who would have thought to look at the heating and air conditioning people? So
now Target does.
Yeah. If you're in a typical practice and you've got, a heat and air person and they've got, some type of IP devices that are in there that control the heating and cooling, I doubt very seriously you're going to consider them a business associate, and they're not going to have an agreement with you or anything like that, but they still have a way into your network.
That leads us into the Internet of Things, where it's not just computers anymore. It is the heating and cooling system that's tied into the internet, and your refrigerator and your coffee maker and your vehicles. And I just read an article like 2 days ago about a guy that was a guinea pig driving a new Jeep with Uconnect on it. And these hackers that had learned how to do this hacked into the system and told him, don't panic, whatever you do. And they took over the car while I was driving down the highway. Yeah. I mean, took over the car. They were controlling the windshield wipers and the washers and the radio and the digital, where you have the navigation system. They even put pictures of themselves up on there. And, and thankfully, I mean, he knew, and he was the guinea pig, but he actually was getting terrified at some of the stuff that they were, they slowed the vehicle down and cars were, honking at him and stuff, and you're going too slow, and he had no control. So, those things are happening. It's not simple anymore. So you definitely need to make this part of something that you think about no matter what your business is. And you're right. If you count on a business partner, you don't want them going down in flames.
Yeah, and a lot of this stuff too, I know when we talk about this, you and I understand a lot of this from a technology level, but somebody who doesn't, it can be very scary. And it's almost one of those things where you want to say, you know what, we're just going to go back to paper and pencil and not have to worry about it. But honestly, a lot of this stuff is not extremely difficult nor extremely expensive to
if you
deter.
Know what you're doing.
I mean, some of the stuff is...
Because part of the problem is people go in there and they tell them that you've got to spend $50,000 putting in all this new equipment because you're not secure. And everybody has a shyster. Yeah,
and that's true for any type of business or vertical. But I mean, a lot of stuff is not that difficult. And I'm not saying you can walk in and, for a couple $100, you're going to be able to have some kind of high level firewall and monitoring and all that. You're not going to be able to do that. But instead of doing absolutely nothing, you could take a little bit and just, make sure your systems are patched well, or make sure you have some type of antivirus and not just some free version you downloaded somewhere or whatever, and make sure that's up to date. I mean, all those things that, if you have a healthcare or a HIPAA compliant IT company, they should be doing all those things anyway. But you should just be making sure that stuff's getting done, even for those businesses, like I said, that may not be quote unquote business associates or whatever. Those things just need to be done, period. And it never hurts to go behind your IT provider and just make sure from time to time you ask those questions. Yeah. Are you monitoring our systems? Are you looking at the reports? We had a discussion not long ago where people, they're getting the reports that say things are wrong. They're just not looking at them. So you have to make sure that, the monitoring is great, but somebody has to also look at it and act on what they're seeing. So, ask those questions. Are you looking at it? Are you monitoring it? Are you providing antivirus? And if so, when it catches something, what are you doing about it? And, there's just a lot of questions that need to be asked just to make absolutely sure you're getting the coverage that you're paying for, as well as the protection that you absolutely need to make sure your business stays viable and you're protecting yourself and your business, your patients, everything.
Yes, and it's not a game. I guess that's the easiest way to say it.
No, it's not a game.
The level of importance that this has in the world as we see it, and we see it through clearer eyes than most people do, it cannot be left as one of those things where you hear it and then you're okay, well, whatever, and you move on. It's something that we keep talking about because eventually it will make sense to someone who's not dealing with it, or those who are dealing with it, it will help them focus their efforts. So when we're doing this, thank you for listening. If you agree with us, and please pass it along to anyone who you think needs to hear it. Tweet us and Facebook us and link us and all those kind of things, because we're getting this done now, and we would like to get the traffic. And please review us, and you can go to the website and just click on the from your phone. If you're a Apple user, you can write from the website, tap the button that says give us a review, or do it from in iTunes. But please share us if you like us, and if not, let us know. We'll change it, maying
No, we won't.
We ain't changing nothing.
We ain't changing nothing. Yeah, but it does let us know that we're bringing value to those who are listening, which is extremely important, because honestly, that's why we're doing it. Is we want to bring value to those people who are taking the time to listen, and it also helps other people to find us, because the more you listen, the more you vote or rate or whatever it is you're having to do, depending on where you're at, it does push up the visibility of this podcast and allows other people to see it. And then you've done your part to make sure that the information gets
share
out,
and
so
share
it helps
alike.
everybody.
Thanks for tuning in. Leave your comments and share things with us. We would love to have ideas, and let us know if you have any questions. We started rolling out the HIPAA answers. They'll come out on, I think we're going to have them come out on Tuesday mornings. It'll be just the question and the answer. And we're also starting to create a link where you can download a PDF with the information. You fill in your name and when you listen to it, and use it as training documentation for your compliance program. Ha, 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 ha. I know.
Such a novel idea.
All right.
Later.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.